See the top of his head.
All right, got it. Okay, let's begin the meeting. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of March 28th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded and is also being held remotely as well as in person in the offices. Let's start off with a roll call of board members present, followed by staff members.
Okay, roll call of the board. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Scott Bieber. Dick Bonner.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Ted Lyons. Kevin Baker.
Yeah.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Mayor Famili.
Yeah.
So we have 7 board members present, and actually Ted Lyons is just walking in across the parking lot, so he'll be here momentarily.
Okay.
For staff, we have our solicitor, Mike Gall from King Spry.
Good afternoon.
And then in addition to myself, we have Ed Klein, Chris Maughan, Chuck Volk, Susan Sampson, Andrew Moore, Bill Poe, Lisa Miller, Mark Bowen, and then we have 2 staff guests today. Brian Geisel is a project engineer in our Capital Works Department, and Jason Gruber from our Water Distribution Sewer Line Maintenance Department in Allentown. So they'll be here for specific topics on the agenda today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ted Lyons is in the room.
Okay, welcome, Ted.
Hello.
All right, the package was mailed out in advance and is also available via email, also on our web. We did receive an update, actually on one agenda item that we received on Thursday. It is a topic under, I think it's the wastewater item, correct?
That's correct.
All right, let's review the agenda. Any need for executive sessions? Any changes, additions, or corrections to the agenda?
Today I have no changes to the agenda and no requests for executive session. Keep it simple.
All right, let's move on then to the approval of the meeting minutes from March 14th, 2022. Richard.
Oh, I beg your pardon, I couldn't hear from Florida.
I guess there's too much sunshine.
Yeah, difficult making its way through the snow flurries.
All right, I'll try and talk up.
I have 2 brief comments. The first one appears on page 3 under the resolution 3-012. The first line, it says is to authorize. I think the word is eliminated. So it reads is to authorize a grant. And the second one is on the succeeding page. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs from the top. It's the second line. Second last word appears as planned when it should really be planned. Once again, the electronic checking of spelling failed us. With that, I make a motion to accept the minutes of the March 14th meeting.
Second.
Please identify who made the second.
And I did,
Amir? Okay. All right, motion made and seconded. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Meeting minutes are passed with those changes. Thank you. At this time, we open up the floor to any public who might have any comments on items that are not on the agenda. Are there any people that wish to speak?
I have no comment.
Thank you, Brian. All right, let's move on then to the first item under Finance and Administration. We have the first draft of the preliminary 2023 to 2027 5-year capital plan, suburban division and administration. Let's see, digital package, pages 10 through 86.
All right, so for this one, Chuck Volk and Ed Klein will carry the presentation on this one. I just wanted to make sure we're all aware we're only talking about suburban division and administration projects this time. And coming up at our next meeting, we will get into the Allentown division. So we're all on the same page of what we're looking at. We do have a presentation to share, which was emailed to the board and posted on our website as well. So everyone should have full access to it. And Chuck, do you want me to go ahead and screen share now?
Sure.
All right. Chuck.
Okay, thanks, Liesl. Hello, everyone. I'm going to present the 2023 to 2027 Suburban Division and Admin Capital Plan. Today is just a preliminary plan, some presentation. So the 5-year capital plan lays out conceptual projects we ask for board approval of the 5-year capital plan after the public comment period. We have an annual budget that lays out the 1-year funding for the upcoming projects that the board approves, like the capital plan. And then we have individual project approval. In approving the capital plan, it's not the last time that you get to see the projects. They come before you again in the budget and then in the individual approval. And then we have financing, specific funding for each group of projects. This is the timeline for the plan. Today we're presenting suburban division and admin. At the next board meeting, I will present the Allentown division capital plan, and then the public comment period begins today for the suburban plan, and it begins on April 11th for the Allentown plan, and then it runs until the 11th of May. And we typically get comments from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, and we may get comments from Lehigh County commissioners, and we provide them to the board in the final request for approval on the 23rd of May, the second meeting in May. This is a summary of the admin plans, the admin projects rather. There are no new projects here. That these are basically recurring projects that we've had on the plan. I won't go through all the financial numbers there, but you can see we have SCADA, programming hardware and software upgrades, computer system hardware and software upgrades, GIS information system upgrades and application development, info technology master plan update, document management, disaster recovery and security upgrades, and then finally CMMS upgrades, which is computerized maintenance management system. This is a detail on the SCADA project in particular, and this is a comprehensive project for all the suburban stations, both water and wastewater, and this is intended to improve communications, and this provides programming and hardware, replaces obsolete communication systems, and reduces risk. It also allows for rapid response when we get alarms that something isn't working right. It allows our operations department to respond in a timely fashion when we have updated SCADA system. And the project also includes staff training on all the updated systems. Now we get into water. We have 2 annual recurring projects. They are comprised of what we call our annual projects. And that's a collection of smaller projects bundled into one. And I have a breakdown on the following slide. And then we have our water main replacement projects in suburban. So this is a breakdown of the annual water projects. You can see all the different categories of projects and the different ways we spend money over the annual. A big one is the reservoir rehab and maintenance and the asset management upgrades, and then general improvements that operations usually is in charge of spending a lot of that money, but it does fall under capital. For our suburban main replacements, if you see in purple on the lower right side, that's our what we call our cycle 6 project for this year. And where that is, that's Schnecksville North. You can see the split in the highways. That's 309 that goes from the lower right to the left of the screen, and that splits with 873. And then just to the east is a development in North Whitehall, our North Whitehall division. That development has been problematic. We've had a lot of water loss there, and we attribute it to a developer installed plastic water main and plastic water services. So that we'll hope to see some very encouraging numbers as far as water loss after we finish that project. So that's this year's project. And then this is a little hard to see. This is the 5-year prioritization of our suburban main replacements. The 7A, our next year, our that area over there off of Shantz Road, that's problematic. All the triangles that you see, and I apologize for the resolution here, are breaks. And we prioritize the main replacements based on break history. So that area has a high break industry. Then there's an area called 7B. That area also has a high break history. Those are both in Upper Macungie Township. So that's next year's, and then the other years are prioritized according to the legend there. I apologize for my phone.
That's a snow squall emergency.
Hopefully I haven't turned down. I don't know why only mine was going.
Responsible.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned replacement of water mains. Is there any particular type of pipe that is failing? Is there any pattern here that we're seeing?
Yeah, a lot of cast iron. In red on this map, those are the remaining cast iron mains in our central. This is our central Lehigh division, and that's where a lot of our breaks are found. And
You mentioned earlier that the one above Schnecksville was plastic.
that's plastic. That's an old developer installed system.
Yeah.
And that's with plastic services that's basically what was a substandard system when it was put in.
Thank you.
These are our other system improvement projects for Suburban Division Water. We have a fixed space meter reading system. That's a study that we're doing right now. In fact, we had a temporary tower truck that was parked out back. It got moved today from here at our main office to our pretreatment plant to do a simulation and determine what the coverage would be if a tower would be located at each location for remote reading of meters, for centralized reading of our water meters. So that's a study phase that's going on this year. I apologize for that. We have a water systems master plan that's going on this year. That's focusing on sources of supply, and it's going to, later phases of that study will focus on storage in our central Lehigh division and also our North Whitehall divisions. We have our upper system pump station, water main extension. That's the pump station on the north side of 222 in the Fogelsville area to convey water from our lower, what we call our lower system, south of 78 to our upper system, north of 78. And that's in design phase right now. And actually this year, we're going to install a water main in an existing casing that we acquired from Upper Macungie Township. We're going to install that water main, and then we're going to cap it for future. And the construction of that station will be development driven, basically, in our Western Lehigh. If you recall, we were early last year, we were approached by a dairy, and we kicked it into high gear and started design of that pump station. And the dairy has since chosen to locate elsewhere, but we're still designing that station, recognizing that there's going to be a future need for that. It's only a matter of time. And then lastly, we have our water main replacement program. The money for this year is basically for replacement of commercial meters. I think it's about 139. And then for within the capital planning period, we have a larger project, and that's for mostly residential meters, and that's over 6,000 meters. These are some pictures. I mentioned a minute ago that the tower truck with a temporary tower that was provided by a company Core Maine, basically a free pilot program to see what kind of coverage we would get in our central Lehigh. So that shot there on the left, that was the truck that has moved as of today. And then on the upper right, that's a picture of a tower next to a tank for our fixed space study, where we're looking at the feasibility of locating on existing towers as much as we can, renting space if need be, in lieu of erecting a new tower in the interest of economics. And that's just a picture of a replacement meter on the lower right, a large commercial meter. These are projects that have been removed from the plan as of this year. The top project, our Arcadia West tank replacement project. That project is finishing construction this spring. In fact, the old tank is being demolished starting today, and the new tank was put in place late last year and started up. So we're finishing that project up. The Central Lehigh Division Well Improvement Study, that project was basically, the scope was redefined, and we're now titling that Water Systems Master Planning to sort of broaden the scope of that and focus more on future needs. The CLD Distribution System Improvement Study, that project was also abandoned and sort of repackaged into our upper system pump station and water main extension project, because basically the CLD Distribution System Improvement Study, it recommended that we convey more water from our lower system to our upper system. So we shifted into design of a pump station to serve future development needs out there just west of Fogelsville. The additional redundant water supply project that was focused in Madison Park North, that project was halted after the well testing on the 72-hour pump test indicated that it would have an impact on neighboring wells, and it showed that the aquifer did not recover. It did not recover satisfactory to DEP requirements, so we halted that project. And lastly, our North Whitehall Division study, That project also, the hydraulic modeling was completed and that's been consolidated into the water systems master planning project, like the CLD well improvement study. For this slide, I'll let Ed present the numbers.
Okay, so in terms of projects specific to suburban water, there's almost $19 million, and that includes $1.3 million of allocated admin. So with that, we budgeted $3 million worth of budget borrowing this year that we are going to do. And we did it for many reasons when we went through the budget. We're also going to borrow an additional $3.2 million this year as we go borrow to cover project costs that are going to occur in suburban water sort of in year 1 and 2. So it's $3.2 million affecting being borrowed for the projects over the 5-year period, but we'll do it when we borrow the over $3 million that we were going to borrow this year, because I'm only going to go out there once. So with the $19 million of costs and the $3 million worth of new borrowing, we're going to get to $21.9 million, almost $22 million of total dollars accounted for in terms of projects and ed. Just looking at the list of projects from cash and operations, $18.8 million. You can see the admin projects there of $1.3 million. And that's just almost half of the suburban side. It all gets allocated to suburban water, suburban wastewater, and then there are some that are on a across the board basis that the city will get as well. But this group gets 1.3 annual projects that are worth $4.6 million. And then Chuck talked about the main replacement. So that'll be $10.2 million in over the 5-year period. And the water meter replacement after borrowing in 23, from 24 onward, it'll be $2.2 million. And then the fixed base meter reading, $460,000. So just going down to the bottom line, the borrowing for $3.3 million will really cover main replacement in 2023 worth 2.5, and then just general system improvements of 725,000. In terms of the assumptions we're making here, basically we have been experiencing around 2% increase. I think that's what we budgeted this year as well. So we're going to hold on that 2.0%, and then the actual increase required would be 3% across every year.
Question. In the mailer I got, maybe it was revised. If I'm reading the right stuff here, it says 5% each year will be required. Is that revised down?
That would be the total revenue requirement of 5%, broken down between 2% of volume and.
Oh, I see. And when you say volume, do you mean volume in?
Like the amount of water.
Yeah, how about inflation? How do you bake inflation?
We built into this 3.0% inflation. I got to be honest with you, I'm a little bit skeptical that might not be high enough, and that's a risk that we have. I'm just trying to follow I'll call it the economic experts who are saying that inflation is going to peak and then settle down to around 2.7%. So I'm trying to stay a little bit conservative, but I'm not trying to build a 7 or 8% increase in there, because then that would get a little bit hairy.
Thank you.
Clarifying question. So that $18 million is cumulative revenue for the next 5 years. Is that correct?
The $18 million?
Yes.
Yes.
Cash from that's
That's
cumulative.
what's built into the revenue. Yes.
And what is the reason you want to borrow that money upfront for the 5 years?
Because I looked at, if you remember, this was a fund that took some significant rate increases,
Sure.
more particularly this year. And when I looked at with the inflation and the project timing, it was going to look like we needed to do something a little bit higher than the 3%. So I wanted to stay with around. I really set out trying to keep it at 3%. So what this borrowing this year, I can piggyback in terms of at least the amount of time and stuff that we borrow, and was nothing more than an attempt to not let this one get nailed again.
I was not aware that this dairy farm firm canceled the project here. Did any of our demands have any effect on their decision not to stay here?
As far as we know, there was just a number of different factors that they looked at. So I don't think that water or sewer was a driving force for them to abandon our location. There are a number of different things at play there, but certainly they looked very closely at the utility, water, sewer, electric, and transportation project.
So in terms of net fund flows, just going down to the bold line, I see we're at a negative flow in 2023, going to a little bit less negative in 2024, and then back up because of the significant increase in CAPEX spending that we're going to take on, $1.6 million on the negative side. And then we kind of start building back up again, 1.3 and 2.2. You can see up there that across the years, we're going to have about $3 million of debt service, which was related now to the refinance debt. And to borrow the $6.56 million, we'll pick up an additional 292.
What?
Sorry? With the additional debts, the $6.6 million, we'll pick up that amount as an additional debt service. So when you're talking about the increases, again, volume increase 2% across the board, 3% user charge increase. So your revenue is really going to go up 5%. I was, again, somewhat comfortable when I look at the cash. The unrestricted balances will be 10.6 or 277 days, 10.2 and 249. I mean, the lowest it gets is 188 days and then goes back up to 226 and 297. And I'm pretty comfortable with, we're above the 1.20 minimum requirement for debt service coverage ratio, and we're at 2+, and it goes up every year. So.
A quick question. I think you might have answered this here, but I may not have understood it. I'm just going back to our philosophy of maintenance type capital expenditures being funded from rates versus project type capital expenditures being funded from borrowing. Feels like we got a good balance of that in here. Actually,
It's even better than that because we're picking up all of the annual maintenance stuff. It is coming through current, I'll call it current cash flows. And with the increase this year that we took on, and even with that, the combination of borrowing and rating, we're starting to pick up a lot more of the project base in the revenue base as we move along in time. So I'm looking at this as an opportunity to keep this fund a little bit stable this year, at the next 5 years, do some borrowing to do it. And at the end of the day, then we would have I'll call it a revenue base that would be sufficient to handle $5 million a year in the project. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Now we'll get into the wastewater projects. These are the projects that we have grouped under the Western Lehigh Interceptor and the Little Lehigh Relief Interceptor. At the top, we have the Central Lehigh Wastewater capacity planning and expansion. Phil DePoe is intimately involved in that project, and that is related to Act 537, increasing wastewater capacity. We have Spring Creek force main air release valve replacements, Spring Creek pump station force main condition assessment, signatory I&I investigation and remediation. This also is Act 537 related to reduce the extra flow in our system and restore capacity. We have the Upper Western Lehigh Interceptor pump station and force main. We have Western Lehigh Interceptor rehabilitation and repairs. That's a new project on this year's capital plan. And lastly, we have Park Pump Station Upgrade Phase 2, which is replacement of the generator, the emergency generator out there. I'm sure everybody's aware of our Western Lehigh Interceptor challenges. These are two photos I thought pretty much demonstrate that. The photo on the left was taken off of Spring Creek Road in Upper Macungie Township. And that manhole there, that's somewhere in Upper Macungie Township, I believe. I'm not sure the number of the manhole, but see the surcharge pressure just pouring out of the under the frame. The project that was on the chart, the Upper Western Lehigh Pump Station and Force Main, that is the recommendation of the interim Act 537 plan, which was approved by DEP late last year. And what that calls for is the installation of a pump station right outside our pretreatment plant, and then routing the force main around the pretreatment plant. You can see it; it's in orange there. It doesn't show up real well, but routing it over across Ruppsville Road, and then along 222, and then it turns and we go across Upper Macungie Township Park and into a manhole near Grange Road. And we talked about that pump station. The board authorized design of that pump station last month, and that's intended to relieve the bottleneck, the hydraulic bottleneck in Trexlertown. So that is in design phase now, and we anticipate bidding that project in the spring of 2023. These are the satellite system wastewater projects in our suburban division. We have I&I investigation and remediation at our Wynwood wastewater plant in North Whitehall Township. Western Weisenberg mechanical screen. What that is, that's a screen to install in the headworks of the Arcadia West plant, intended to remove bulky inorganic material that's causing downstream problems at the plant to get it out of the waste stream. We have sanitary sewer evaluation survey in Weisenberg, Low Hill, and Upper Milford Townships. Heidelberg Heights I&I investigation and remediation. That's part of our corrective action plan under our DEP consent order and agreement. We're required to replace all the original vitrified clay sewer pipe and sewer laterals up there. So we will have, after this year, we'll just have one more project, and then we'll have all that clay pipe replaced. And then we'll look at the private side to look for the extra flow coming into the system. We have a project to do some rehab at the wastewater plant up there in Heidelberg. That is also a mechanical screen project to be installed at the headworks of the plant to get the rags and stuff out of the waste stream, to improve processes and reduce maintenance. And the last two are Lynn Township. There's a project to upgrade and expand the wastewater plant. That is developer driven. That project is more or less on standby. We are out of sewer allocations up there. So if a big development would become a reality up in Lynn Township, the plant would have to be expanded. Right now, there's no need for the plant to be expanded, but it is a project, more or less a placeholder on the plan until the development comes, until the township updates their Act 537 plan and demonstrates what the future need is. Right now, we're not aware of what the future need is, and that's the township's duty to do that. And they were actually recommended by DEP to update their plan a couple of years ago. And lastly, we have an I&I investigation and remediation project up there in Lynn. We did a whole lot of manhole rehab work a couple of years ago. Our operations department has been diligent at doing the closed circuit TV inspection of that system. We still have extra flow that's coming in that we need to find and we need to get out of the system. So that continues to be an ongoing work up there. These are a couple shots from Heidelberg Heights in Heidelberg Township along Thompson Street. This is part of our annual sewer main replacement project. You can see the guys, there's a trench box there in the trench, and they're replacing the sanitary sewer main. And on the right there, they're installing a wrap around the chimney, which is designed to keep infiltration from entering into the manhole. It's like a rubber, like a butyl material. These are our annual recurring projects in Suburban Division Wastewater. We have what we call our annual projects, which is a consolidated project consisting of a whole bunch of smaller projects. I have a breakdown on the next slide. And then our pretreatment plant improvements, which is basically asset management driven, just to keep that 30+ year plant performing at the level of service that it has been providing. There's always work up there. Some of the work on deck up there are replacement of aeration deck mixers, installation, replacement of a mechanical screen, HVAC improvements in the solids building, which is a very corrosive environment where the belt filter presses are located for sludge dewatering. And there's also rebuilds of the old belt filter presses. So there's lots of work under that project. This is a list of all the smaller projects that we bundle up into what we call the annual projects. And these are two projects that were removed from this year's capital plan. We had a project that we called Western Lehigh Interceptor Trexlertown Area Wastewater Capacity Solution Alternative. It's kind of a cumbersome title. I'm kind of glad to get rid of that one. So what that project basically turned into the recommendation of Phil's interim Act 537 plan, which is the construction of the Upper Western Lehigh Interceptor pump station and force main to resolve the hydraulic bottleneck situation in Trexlertown. And then our Park Pump Station force main rehab project. If you recall, John Parsons, I believe he gave a report late last year on the findings from that inspection, where the force main was entered at, I believe it was 5 key locations at air release valve access hatches, and a representative condition inspection was performed up and downstream of that air release valve. And the recommendation for the study was to revisit the condition in 10 years, that no urgent rehabilitation was required. So we're shelving that study for now, and it'll probably reappear in 8 to 9 years from now as something that we need to revisit. And these are Ed's financials.
So this fund obviously is in better shape than Suburban Water was. We do not need to borrow not $1 to fund it all. Altogether, the project specific to Suburban Wastewater and at $18.3 million. And then again, they get their fair share of the allocated admin worth $1.3 million. So your total project value over the 5-year span is $19.7 million. And in this fund, all of it is going to come from current cash flows and reserves. So no borrowing. You can see the list of projects there that are going to be taking spent money from operations is of that $19.7 million. Admin is 1.3, annual that he put up is 1.9. Wastewater pretreatment plan of 3.7, and then projects specific to Western Lehigh Interceptor of $8.7 million, and Little Lehigh $2 million, and then the satellite systems around $2.1 million, and that's, you get to the 19.7. Like I said, in terms of net fund cash flows, considering that it's all coming from current, the only time that we hit a negative is in 2024, 47,000, but it's all positive in 23, 25, 26, and 27, and over that period of time, you're talking about a surplus of $7 million. The inflation rate again was 3.0%, kept it standard across this fund as well. Current debt service is obviously lower than all the other two funds that we have. Well, only $736,000 a year in debt service. So actually the net, I'll call it the net weighted revenue increase comes out to be in like 1.3, 1.4, and that is all that we need to get to funding all the projects, and also having, I think, some pretty respectable days cash on hand. 2023 will be almost 250, drops a little bit, and then back up to 256, 326, and then 386. Debt service coverage ratio, well, we're way far upwards of the 1.2. You're almost at 9 and 8.4. So all of the metrics in terms of cash on hand and debt service coverage ratio look pretty good for this fund, and they're paying for everything out of current revenues.
Question. Yeah, more of a philosophical question. Is it possible to be in too good a financial shape?
Ooh, I don't know that how I would classify as too good financial shape.
Well, I mean, it's a rule of business. If you have too much cash on hand, you're running an inefficient operation. I mean, we're able to do this. Our debt service is great. Again, I'm not saying we're doing this. I'm just saying philosophically.
I think philosophically, I could make this statement that at some point in time, you wouldn't need to require that as much from the customers if you were doing that well. The thing that makes me just kind of be a little bit reserved in this is that 537 plan is still a big unknown for this fund. And so I don't know that once we start talking about the big chunks of money later on, I'm not sure this will look as good as it looks now.
If I could add to that too, you hit the nail on the head with the 537, and specifically with the Western Lehigh group, we've made a conscious effort to build reserves so that we have at least some cushion to get into these projects. Once we hit March of 2025, Phil's favorite date, and know what the plan is, and we start building out some projects, we'll draw on the reserve funds for the initial block of projects. And that was by design with Western Lehigh. Yeah.
So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'll entertain any questions that the board might have.
Just an entertaining question. One of the things we often wrestled with is, and I think we've got a lot better at it, is we put all this stuff on our plate, and how well do we get through it in the year that we assign it? Recognizing that we're in a weird period of time anyway, but just wondering how we were doing 2022. No, it's also a question for a financial review, but since we're talking about capital projects, how do you feel about how we're getting through the year, 1 quarter in?
I will say projects in general are slow because of supply chain. I hate to use that excuse, but we do see real equipment delays in projects, and we always try to be optimistic. Maybe we try to temper that optimism a little bit in the plan, given how long it takes to get equipment made. I think we're doing pretty well. I know we have some of our, I'll get into this when I do the Allentown division plan, but we have some slow progress there based on equipment delays. Here we haven't had as much delays. I do know the Park Pump Station generator project that you saw on the plan, that generator is a long lead time item. And that could be from 36 weeks to 50 weeks, which we're just not sure now. We heard of a very dismal prediction several months ago that would be about a year lead time on that natural gas generator. It has since gotten a little better. The forecast improved, and we're looking at about 36 weeks now. So that's one of the factors. Regulatory sometimes holds us up, but that's the biggest unknown right now in our projects and trying to schedule that.
How do you feel about availability of labor to do projects on site?
Well, during COVID, it was a real problem because contractors had crews that got sick, and we had a lot of project delays due to COVID. I think things are normalizing now. I hope. I mean, it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem right now, but I was hearing that excuse from contractors for better part of 2 years.
Yeah.
Do you see the cost escalation on your parts, and impacting what you have budgeted for 2022 for the capital?
Yeah, well, I'm really concerned about pipe availability, and actually maybe Jason Gruber sitting next to me can weigh in on that too, because for our suburban main replacement, and when we talk about the Allentown plan, for the Allentown main replacement, we're really concerned about getting the project done this year with the availability of pipe. And we're looking at the possibility of procuring the pipe to save some lead time. We're looking into that now with our purchasing manager. And seeing, just trying to get a handle on how many months will that save us? Is it worth it to do that? But that's the biggest, like, material availability for pipe is one of my major concerns. I don't know what you're seeing on Allentown.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a problem with not only the pipe side, but the copper side as well. Copper inflation, 40–50%. We've been seeing pipe, same thing, big increases with cost. And just the sheer fact of getting it. A lot of people are ordering it well in advance, and now what it's doing is creating a backlog for everybody else, just like the automobile industry.
Pipe manufactured in US?
Yeah, we use ductile iron pipe, and it's US manufacturer. And yeah, the contractors, it puts them in a precarious situation in bidding a project and then not having the pipe available. Like, how much is it going to cost down the road? Like, what sort of escalation are they going to have to endure for that? So they're going to be building that into their prices.
Is there some way to negotiate that? Because having been in the business, and you really don't know where your costs are going to be, that you could take perhaps the low bidder and work out this is my estimate. I need help if it jumps, if it falls, or I'll give you the best price I got.
Yeah, I mean, there's something called an escalation clause
Yeah.
that you can put in. It complicates things a little bit, but in all fairness, it can be justified. And that we have not used that lately, but we'll certainly revisit that with our engineer when we prepare to bid these projects. It may help bid prices actually, because without that, they may just throw really high numbers, thinking that the trend is just going to continue.
The stuff that we use, do we typically have that delivered right to the site, or do we inventory it?
We have the contractor furnish it typically. Now, if we were to try to procure the pipe ourselves, we would have to store it. So, I mean, we have to look at those logistics too. Do we have room for storing a mile or two of pipe? And we're working through that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know the purchasing manager has been scrambling a lot to try to get out in front of a lot of vendors. I think to answer your question on labor, I have a little bit more concern. For 2 years, the projects have been delayed because of COVID, and all of a sudden everybody wants to do their projects. Okay, so that's gonna create some type of effect in terms of ability to compete for labor. And the other fact is, this is really the first time in quite a few years that there's been actually a registered level of wage inflation to go along with it, so.
Yeah, I mean, a bit from my own background, I'm seeing very extended schedules on delivery, lack of reliability, people not backing prices that they've previously quoted, and labor as a proportion of a project just increasing. You know, just to throw numbers out, used to be 50-60%, now 75-80%. Just because it can, because there's shortages of trade skills and other skills out there. I mean, you go to the electrical hall and not find anyone, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
exactly. It's kind of an interesting, challenging environment to get things done to any kind of schedule or budget.
Yeah, we're gonna be bidding the main replacement project for the city, this year's project in a couple months, and it will be interesting to see what the prices look like.
It'll be interesting. And it would be worth taking note of whether or not these prognosticators are right with their 2.7%.
Couple of other factors that I know we're thinking about, as well as all the infrastructure funding that is coming down the pike, and the availability of money for utilities to be doing these kinds of projects. These are exactly the same kinds of projects that all utilities are looking to do with that funding. So the pressure on service providers is going to increase. So.
Hey, Chuck, it's Jeff. Just a comment for you, not a question.
Sure.
On the sewer line project going through Grange Park,
Yes.
I know you guys just said you've been in discussion with the township. I had heard that they were considering putting lights in over near the bypass. So might want to just double check that, make sure everybody's on the same page, that they're not going to go right where your sewer line's going to go.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. Actually, the township engineer is going to be attending all our progress meetings during design phase. So they will be kept informed about this project, and it's a good tip. I will talk about it at our kickoff. We have a design phase kickoff meeting later this week, so I'll mention.
Okay, good. All right, thanks. I just want to make sure you knew of it. I don't know any details. I just heard some preliminary info, so I wanted to let you know.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So just from a process standpoint, we'll present the Allentown draft plan at the next meeting. If there are changes to the suburban division as we go through, and we're still reviewing, a few things here and there, we'll give you replacement pages for that, and then bring any public comments that we receive back in May for review before we ask for approval. So the city of Allentown will also get a copy, and they usually provide some comments along with the LEPC in the county.
Okay, any other board comments or public comments? Okay, let's move on. There aren't any items under water. We do have one item under wastewater. It's the Allentown Division, Kleins Island Wastewater Treatment Plant, Primary Digester number 1 cleaning. Staff is seeking approval. It's I don't have digital pages, so that was what was sent out on Thursday of last week to the board.
Brian, those page numbers are 87 to 89 for those who were following along on a computer screen. And that project is with Chuck Volk and Brian Geisel.
Thanks, Liesl. Yeah, this project is to clean primary digester number 1 at Kleins Island. The digester tanks are on a 5-year cleaning cycle. So every 5 years, we take a tank down and empty it and clean it and do some necessary rehabilitation. So I want to introduce the board to Brian Geisel. Brian is the project engineer on this project. Brian is Allentown Division project engineer in Capital Works. Brian's office is over at Kleins Island, and Brian's going to be managing this project, and he'll walk you through the bidding of this project. So Brian, if you want to tell them about the project.
Right, thanks. Yeah, so this is to clean up the digester. And over time, there's stuff that builds up, inert objects, plastics and grit, sand and stuff that builds up and takes up volume in the digester, so we have to clean them out periodically. So this is to have a contractor come in. We'll dewater what we can, the operations pumps. But then once that pump loses prime or gets blocked up, then that's when we turn it over to the contractor to get all the other stuff that's built up on the bottom of the tank. So they bring in their own pumps, their dewatering equipment, and then utilizing our utility water, they'll dewater the sludge and then pump it into our trucks. So other than just getting all the stuff out and cleaning it out, there's also the procurement of a perth system compressor. This is what we use to gas mix our digesters. So this is actually mainly for next year when we clean out number 2. We're looking to replace number 2's compressor. So the lead time on those compressors is like at least 6 to 8 months. So we're looking to procure the equipment through this bid, that by next year we have it in time and then we can change it out. There's also the digested sludge sample lines. There's 4 lines off of the elevation taps that we use to sample the digester. Those are old copper lines that have been getting pinhole leaks periodically. So we're looking to replace them while we can, so we don't have a failure. Yeah, so went out to bid. GHD was the design engineer. They put the spec together, oversaw the bid process on 10 bid. And then we got 3 bids. The low bid was SpectraServe at $317,964. And with the other staff and contingency, the complete authorization was $332,964. Yeah, we're looking for authorization for that through the Allentown Division Fund.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, when we checked out the SpectraServe's references, this is what they specialize in doing. They've done lots of this type of work. So we feel good about this bid, so we're recommending award of the project to SpectraServe.
Who we have used the years past for?
There was a company called Denali, I think. Did they do it last time?
It was Frank Environmental, Denali. I think Quad was the GC, but that was the last time there was the roofs replaced as well. And that was like the big budget item, so I think that was the GC. I think it's Frank and Denali.
Yeah, there's only a handful of players in this market that can do that, like 4 or 5. So we're asking for board approval of to award the bid to SpectraServe and then board approval of the capital project authorization of $332,964. We do not have professional service authorization as part of this because that work's already included in the consultant's upfront proposal to us.
Okay, everything is well explained. I think you need a motion and a second from board members.
I'll make a motion
Thank you, Linda.
that we approve the 332,964.
I'll second it. This is Norma.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second for capital project authorization of $332,964 with a general contract award to SpectraServe for $317,964. Are there any questions?
I just have a quick question. I'm completely in favor of the project, but Chuck, I know the Perth system is an older technology for digester mixing. You guys are still having good luck with that and it's working efficiently?
I'm gonna have to defer that one to Brian. Brian, how would you comment about the performance of the Perth system?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked into sludge mixing, like the Rotomix system is one. But we do get pretty good performance out of the gas mixing with the Perth. And then we also have chopper pumps that'll sludge mix as well, and scum busters, which is like a vertical chopper pump. So with the combination of them, we get by. And the compressors themselves, they just run 24/7. And we don't have too many problems with them. So.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the question. I've been involved where we've actually demoed those Perth systems and put in vertical draft tube mixers or Rotomix systems, things like that. But if it's sufficient, that sounds good. Just wanted to check.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, any other questions? All right, motion was made and seconded. Let's vote by voice vote. Take a roll call.
Roll call for the Klein's Island primary digester #1 cleaning capital project authorization and SpectraServe contract. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Dick Bonner,
Yes.
Norma Cusick,
Yes,
Ed Lyons,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes,
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Mayor Camille.
Yes.
Thank you. That's 8 yes votes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Brian. Okay, moving on to item number 7 on our agenda, monthly financial review. Guess that's the Ed Show.
Yes, and
Digital.
again, we have a presentation that was shared with the board, which I will put up on the screen.
We'll hit the summary figures for just the month of February. It's good to see all 3 funds showing us actual net income on the positive side. You can see that that resulted in LCA being almost at $2 million in net income. We had forecasted that all 3 funds and total LCA would be on the positive side. So we had kind of a mixture in variances. We were a little bit favorable on suburban water, and a little bit unfavorable suburban wastewater, and a favorable variance on the city side. So income is actually up by about $247,000 to what we forecasted. In terms of cash flows, again, LCA almost at $3 million there in the bottom line. All 3 funds are showing a cash surplus for the month. We had forecasted that would be the case, and that the total at LCA would be $2.8 million of cash surplus on a forecasted basis. And again, kind of a little bit mixed in terms of variances to that forecast. Water is up. Suburban wastewater is also up, and then the city was down just a little bit. But again, being green and favorable variance in total is a good thing. Debt service coverage ratio, we're 2.18 on suburban water, 10.87 on wastewater, and cities 2.74. Obviously all better than the 1.20, and in this particular case, all three funds are better than what we had forecast. So on a year-to-date basis, again, heading positive on the actuals for net income of $2.5 million total LCA. Suburban water, wastewater, and city of Vision are all showing positive net income. We thought that would be the case when we forecasted, and it is. So the forecast was all positive as well. And again, a somewhat mixed variance compared to the forecast. On water, we're up. Wastewater down a little bit, and city division is also up, and altogether LCEA is up. So that's good. Cash flows, all three funds were on the positive side. Actually, a nice cash flow on the wastewater side of 2.1 million. So LCA almost hit 2.4. We had forecasted a total of 2.2 for LCA. You can see all three of the funds were expected to be on the positive side of cash flow. And again, the variances are favorable in water, favorable in wastewater, and down a little bit on the city side. And again, year-to-date debt service coverage ratio is 2.07, 9.22, and 2.28. And all of that is good with respect to targets, also good with respect to forecast. All right, so this is what we think is going on for the full year. At this point in time, we had a budget of $6 million for total LCA. We think we're down just a little bit to 5.9, just looking at the funds. Suburban wastewater, we think will be a little bit better than budget in terms of net income. We think wastewater is gonna go down a little bit with respect to the budget, and city division down a little bit with respect to budget. And on cash flows, we said 10.4 million, well, $10.3 million versus 10.2. So we're actually showing in total a favorable variance on cash flows, and that's coming from suburban water being up by 109,000, suburban wastewater down a little bit, so it offsets some there. And the city division up by almost 69,000. So I'm happy with what's going on with the cash flow. And on terms of debt service coverage ratio, none of the numbers look bad with respect to targets, and there are small amounts of variance with respect to budget. Okay, how we did in terms of major factors, just looking at year-to-date suburban water, we were up by 376,000 in terms of net income, and that's better than forecast by 53. And where's it coming from? Basically, operating revenues are up just a little bit, 40, and operating expenses up a little bit as well. And financial side is lower investment income, and that caused a slight erosion of the nice favorable variances in net operating profit. So it was down by 11,000. And we had a little bit higher interest expense. But all in all, not really big numbers there. In terms of cash flows, we had a positive 94. We're higher than forecast by 51. Most of the variance, good variance, is coming from operations because that was up almost 69,000. You had higher debt service by 18,000 and other unfavorable 5, and CAPEX this time was lower by 5,000, so that helped. Suburban wastewater, positive in net income, a little bit off the forecast by 22. Revenues not much just unfavorable by 8. Expenses lower by 13, so that made up some of the operating revenue variance. And then we had lower investment income, and we're gonna need to take a better look at what's going on with investment income because things are changing. Cash flows, $2.1 million. That's a nice cash flow for a month, for a year to date, higher than forecast by almost 200. Most of this is coming from operations where that was favorable by 39 and lower CapEx. We're under forecast by 186,000 right now. On the city side, net income, 2 million, better than forecast. And basically across the board, operating revenues, operating expenses were lower, operating revenues were higher, and interest expense was lower on the city side. On cash flows, we're positive 175, that's down by 43,000. You're getting some help by higher cash from operations, but that's being eroded by CapEx was higher in this fund by 203,000. So what do we look like in terms of operating revenues on suburban water? A little bit better, 2.2 versus 2.1. We think we're going to finish at 16.2, kind of a little bit below where we budgeted, but not a lot of variance right now. Suburban wastewater operating revenues. Right now we're at 2909 versus 2917, and nothing to write home about there. We think we'll be slightly lower at 21,127 as compared to budget, which is 21.16. And on the city division, $8.3 million of operating revenues versus a little bit higher than what we forecasted. Year to date of 8.3. Where we think we'll finish the year is 50, almost 51, 50.8, and budget's 50.9. So again, all three of them are not showing any major concerning variances right now. On operating expenses, we're a little bit better, 1.6 versus where we were forecast, and we think we'll finish the year at 12.8 versus the 13. Suburban wastewater operating expenses, 2.8, so we're right pretty much in line, and we think we're going to finish at 19.4 versus 19.3. So again, we're 2 months into the year, and right now it's a good thing that there's no jumping or variances jumping off the map right now. 3.5 in terms of city division versus the 3.6, so that's good on operating expenses. Lower is better. 31.422 versus 31.451, again lower, but not much there. So this is where we are with CapEx. Suburban water, we have now spent 465,000 versus a year-to-date forecast of 469. So based on what Chuck's group told me, we think we're going to be at 5.9 versus 5.5. So that's going to be up compared to budget. And I believe that that's due to some carry forward. In terms of suburban wastewater, we're at 364. We thought we'd be at 550, so we're down a little bit. But we're forecasting at 3063 versus 2870, so up a little bit on this one. And on the wastewater side, that's probably driven by some variances on the 537 plan. City division, we're at 559 versus 357, so we're faster out of the gate than what we forecasted. But at the end of the year, we think we'll be at 10,868 versus the 11,265 we budgeted. This was our forecast performance in terms of plus or minus 5%. You can see where the big hitter is investing in other and non-operating income expense, and that's interest expense and some investment in income. So we got some fine tune the pencils a little bit for some of the non-operating stuff. But on the operating side, I'd say pretty good, so. So year-to-date operating ratio, and this is with depreciation, so we're at 1.36. That's better than budget target and an internal target of 1.00. Suburban wastewater, we're down a little bit, 1.04 versus the 1.10, but better than the internal target. Not budget, but just an internal target. City 2.4, all looks good versus 1.62 and 1. And total LCA, we're at 1.71 to 1.39 and 1. So that's good. So just one little blip there in suburban wastewater. Okay, without depreciation, it gets better, 1.98 versus 1.62 and 1.22. See, in suburban water goes the other way without depreciation. So it tells me something about what the depreciation variance. So 1.66 versus 1.59 or 1.4. So that's good. Look at the city, the bar's way above 3.45 versus 202 and 114. And so all of that makes LCA look good at 254 versus 182 and 121. Again, we're touching on debt service coverage ratio. Suburban water is good, better than target. Suburban wastewater is down just a little bit, 9.22. And then city is at 2.28. And I'd like to see that number in the city too, like it is now, because it was a period of time when that was a struggle. So that looks good. 2.51 for LCA versus 2.07 and 1.2. Base cash on hand. At this point in time, nothing really major. Suburban water is 176.5, so we're only 3.5 days off. The other two funds are well above 180 days at 233.9, 264.6. So just a little bit down now in suburban water, and we believe that will fix itself by the end of the year. So. Questions?
Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Ed, for your presentation.
Welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to the next topic. It's the monthly system operations overview. That was digital board packages 99 to 103. Report for February.
Yeah, so this is our first joint report by Andrew Moore, our Director of Plant Operations, and Chris Mullen, our Director of Service and Technology. Take it away.
Thanks, Lisa. So as we mentioned, the operations report is in the board packet. As far as water production and wastewater treatment, there's really no highlights. We're pretty in line with what we typically see around this time of the year. The lower section of the report, there was three SSOs and bypasses in February. Main breaks were reduced, and that's likely due to the higher temperatures. However, I'm not sure that's going to be a repeating trend with what we're seeing outside today. No injury accidents, which is great. And the SSOs were in February. We had one in Allentown, which was due to a buildup of rags. And we also had one at the pre-treatment plant, which was about 12,000 gallons of sludge. That occurred at the waste receiving station, and it happened due to a power failure. We also had a bypass in February, which was at Heidelberg Heights. We did have a large storm in the beginning of the year, and it produced a bunch of rain, which ended up putting the plant into wet weather mode. It lasted for about 3 days. And then other highlights, we have a report from Jason, which has to do with the Huck line soil samples.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, it's finally nice to be here and not be asking for money. I'm usually the guy that says, hey, I need money. I got all kinds of problems. The Huck line, it's been a while. It's been 2 years now. So kind of just to refresh everybody's memory. The Huckleberry Ridge Reservoir is a 10 million gallon reservoir in our western end of town. Its primary function is to serve really the entire system, but more importantly, the western end, and it's our interconnection with our Suburban division. Suburban has a 24-inch pipe off this large transmission main that they count on and they need water for. Back in the report back in 2020, this is kind of where all this started. We discovered some water coming up on 17th Street, right by William Allen High School. The crews dug it up to determine basically what they found is this ductile iron pipe had a hairline crack. And what I mean by hairline crack, it literally was a hairline crack, just at the worst possible spot. It was on a belt. So they had to shut this pipe down and do the work. Well, they had trouble shutting the pipe down. There was a valve that they discovered that was not listed in the GIS system as being broken. And they had to extend the shutdown further. And it created some movement, in my opinion, because this line, since it's been installed since 1983, has really never been shut down. A few months later after that occurred, that's where the one we've seen in the media, the big break on 17th and Union, where the Mercedes-Benz was in the trench. That's when that thing broke, and it sheared broke basically at the bell and split apart and created a lot of problems. So we basically said, hey, we got an issue. What's going on here? We want to see, why is this pipe failing? Chuck talked about cast iron a little bit, and 2 weeks ago I talked about spun cast. This pipe's a ductile iron pipe. It's 1983, and in our business, it's not that old, and it shouldn't be doing what it's doing. So the investigation work took place. We put on our detective hats and figured out what's going on. First thing we checked is the plants. Was there a pressure pump surcharge? Was there something that happened in the system? Did a vehicle possibly hit a hydrant, create some water hammer? We looked at a lot of different things from that end. We didn't find anything. We had basically did that robotic report, and they inspected the inside of the pipeline, and they used a magnetic type of system that has like crawlers on the pipe, crawled along the pipeline through this section. It's probably about 1.5 miles of it completed. That report didn't really show anything that says, hey, there's you got some major issues, you got some major failures. So the next phase basically is when that major break took place, that complete rupture, we had sent that out to the manufacturer that made the pipe. That's in Alabama. US Pipe was the maker of that pipe, and they offered to do the study for free and examine the pipe to say, hey, forensically, what's going on? We didn't like what we seen, and part of that was we seen a lot of corrosion, exterior corrosion in the pipeline. The report indicated that a section of the pipe, that 30% of the wall loss from the exterior was missing. That's a problem. So what's causing that? The next phase is it the soil samples that are causing that? Unlikely, because the pipe was installed in 1983, right? So they used 2A modified stone backfill. But we went along and did the study anyway. LCA crews conducted a total of like 7 samples. In the report, it indicates 5, but we did a follow-up because we wanted to do not just where the breaks occurred, but the entire length to get a good result. Was it possibly that this section that, a contractor had put in material that he wasn't supposed to do? We know that occurs. Unfortunately, the report came back that kind of almost indicated that all the soil, which was kind of the stone, all indicated a corrosive type environment. The one section where the break originally occurred, if you're familiar with the area, has a little bit of an incline. And that incline, the one sample that we had gotten back, had high levels of chloride, basically the stuff that we spray on the road for in the wintertime and salt. It's not that deep, and it is possible that some of the fissures and cracks in the roadway, when you salt the roadway and you have all the spraying you do, gets down into your stone. And that doesn't help cast iron or ductile iron pipe when you add salt to the mixture. The next phase, basically what we're gonna look at is what else is speeding up the corrosion? You know, what's causing this, you know, besides maybe the soil? Is there something else that may be causing that? And we know electricity has a direct effect on the pipeline and how long adding electricity and you having straight current, what we call it in the industry, speeds up the corrosion factor. So the next phase, we had hired this group that did the soil samples. They do straight current analysis. And in the report, I'm not sure if it's in the report packet, they did what they call desktop straight current analysis. The desktop straight current analysis is basically somebody looking at a computer and saying, is there substations? Is there electrical substations nearby? Or is there something that may be causing the current to leak into the ground? Their report didn't really show that from the desktop version that occurs, but we do know from experience working in the system that we do occasionally, and if you remember, we have a few injuries based upon this, is straight current does occasionally come from the homeowner side. And what I mean by that is basically inside your house, inside these residential or commercial property, if you're neutral, your ground bar, years ago, the code was to ground to your water pipe. Well, Allentown's old, so all the stuff is grounded. Well, if you have a hot wire, your positive side, anywhere bleeding over, that's gonna create current out in the system. And that's where we had seen some of the times where employees get shocked when they connect the service. That straight current goes out and it's not good for the metal pipe. It adds, speeds the corrosion. So there's a lot going on, but you know, from the criticality standpoint, we normally don't do this. We normally don't go to this level, but because of the size of the main, what it supplies, what it's, you know, obviously affects our suburban operations, we felt it was important to kind of really do our homework with this. Now, the biggest question is that you may have, and you're probably going to ask me, is what are we going to do about it? You know, we know that the ground is moderately corrosive. There's no short-term quick fix to take all the soil out of 1.5 mile of pipeline and replace it with clean stone. What we have done is we have installed pressure sensors along the pipeline, basically to give us real-time alerts on what's going on. If it drops 1 PSI, we'll get it alerted through our standby phones. Our emergency dispatch people will be right away on scene. We're increasing our leak detection on the pipeline. And we're looking at some other means and methods about what we're going to do. Eventually, we're going to have to replace the pipeline. I mean, like anything, it's going to have to be replaced. It's probably going to have to be replaced sooner than we would have liked because of some of the corrosion issues we have seen.
Tell us again where this pipe runs from and to.
So the Huckleberry, what we call the Huckleberry Ridge Reservoir it's a reservoir above the cemetery in South Whitehall Township off of Walpert Avenue. It's a 10 million gallon reservoir. The source water comes from basically our treatment facility down in Martin Luther King. The line was installed back in 1983 was the first section where it was installed. Before we had all these buildings and all the need for water, there was no reservoir. It was just basically a 36-inch pipe that went up to town, up to the hospital at 17th and Chew, and it kind of acted as like an extra supply for that area. As time went on and the system got bigger and the need for water became apparent, later in the 80s, they built that reservoir. And they extended the pipeline from there upwards. So it's not the entire pipeline that's subject to the problem. It's only a section about 1.5 miles that runs from Martin Luther King to 22nd and Chew. It runs up 17th Street where we had the brakes, makes a left on Chew Street, runs by the fairgrounds, and it stops there. The other downfall to the pipe, this situation is when the city installed this pipe, and you've probably seen this in past reports. The pipeline size that they put in, the thickness of the pipe, was a lower class than what we use today. It was called class 50 pipe. So it's not your class 52 where you get in your higher class ratings. It's thicker pipe. What does thicker pipe do? It's like driving the old cars. They're not going to rust out as fast, right? This is a little thinner. So when you have your wall loss, it's a problem because now you don't have as much time. You know, it ain't going to last as long. If we had to do it over again today, if it was today and we were making this decision, we'd probably go with a thicker class pipe and maybe some corrosion resistant material on the exterior of the pipe.
There was a conversation, if I recall correctly. We were going to use a consultant to guesstimate the thickness of the wall in that segment to see if there are portion of the wall which is susceptible to break. Do I recall that correctly?
Yes, you do recall that correctly. And that was a group we had hired, and that was what I was talking about, that pure robotic report where they have basically the fingers that kind of go out and run along the pipeline. In the report, they indicated 7 possible issues. And I wasn't real thrilled with the report of saying, well, you know, I'm not 100% guaranteed that these are the problems. So the goal was to, and what we did was, I want to make sure this is a problem. We dug up and excavated 3 of the 7 spots before we just went, you know, and dug everything to kind of examine the pipe. So we dug it up, we removed the pipe from the ground, we examined the pipe, and we didn't see, and the company that came in and did, we didn't see where the problems where they had indicated with the robotic report. It's a good thing, but it's a bad thing because we didn't, you know, they weren't there.
Have we tried to use a corrosion lab to give a piece of pipe and the environment, whatever they have, the gravel put in there, because they have accelerated tests that they can do and see if there is, you know, surface erosion, and then they can expand it to say, okay, if this in 1 week it goes this much, in a year, 2 years it will be that much. Have you tried to do that and, you know, pinpoint that actually is the backfill is causing that corrosion?
Yeah, we had contracted with its EDT, Engineer Design Technologies in Maryland, that had completed these soil samples. They were recommended by, I had reached out to Gannett and some others, and you know, I wasn't really familiar with this group to see what kind of work they have done. We had sent the soils down there, and on top of that, I had sent another section of the pipe where the 2 sections we had taken out, just because I wanted to get a different analysis compared to, you know, the manufacture of the pipe. Which is a good thing, their analysis didn't show, you know, in this section that we took out, a huge amount of wall loss. We were at about 10%. So it could be that the section that broke, I mean, obviously broke for a reason, right? It could have been, you know, maybe corrosion, obviously, that was higher in that area. We seen when we removed the pipe that there was some stress on the bell itself. That's where it had broken. And we think possibly during the manufacturing or the process of placing the pipe, there was too hard of a deflection on that joint, created a stress point. We're hoping that that's all it was. You know, that's where we're hoping the line kind of gets back to normal. Just in theory, going back from when this pipe was installed, we really haven't had any issues. It's just unfortunate that it's occurring on a pipe that we consider fairly new compared to some of the pipes that were been in the ground since 1930.
So this is Jeff. I have just a question. When you're saying that corrosion, you're saying the pH is high, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so and I'm not, like I said to Lisa, I wasn't sure if that actually made it in the board meeting booklet, but we can certainly share the actual analysis of the report that kind of really drills down, and there's a lot of different things from the pH to, there's a lot of talk about different chemicals that possibly could be contributing to that. But generally, on average, of all the samples, based upon their scale, the AWA corrosion scale, it indicates a corrosive environment. Moderately corrosive is the terminology they had used.
So when they did the soil samples, was there a profile done of the different types of soils? And the only reason I'm asking, and maybe it's a wild guess, but as you probably know, there's lots of old concrete roads and road bases in the city. Do you think that has anything to do with it?
You know, Jeff, I kind of would like to say that it probably doesn't, but just because of, you know, it being installed in 1983, which is, again, kind of new. It's less than 40 years old. I was surprised on some of the findings because I wasn't anticipating finding that in a 2A modified type stone. I was kind of figuring that we weren't seeing any issues. But I can certainly share that with you, Jeff, and others.
Okay, thank you. I was just some initial thoughts. Thank you very much.
The reason question that is the stress fracture or it is corrosion? Because when you're gonna go to reinstall the pipe, understanding what the root cause is really help you out to avoid that. I mean, you are going the same place because
Yeah.
you don't have the concrete, so that's the reason we are asking us that
Yeah.
questions.
Yep, it's certainly, and that's kind of what the investigation work is. Maybe we'll never know exactly, probably likely, I'm not gonna lie, that we'll never have a concrete answer that says that's what happened. We can lead to say, based upon science, that we know that the soil is somewhat corrosive. We know that the pipe has some external corrosion. We know that it looked like, and you can't really tell that the pipe had a harder deflection on when it broke. We'll never 100% probably know what caused the initial break.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much for a very detailed explanation of that, Jason. Moving on to the next item.
Andrew, go ahead.
That'd be
So
for
the
Andrew.
The next one is an update on the LCA pretreatment hauled waste program. Earlier in the year, we talked about the 1,4-dioxane issue that occurred. So these are some of the updates that we're putting into place to hopefully prevent any future incidents that would occur that are similar in nature. The first one that we're really implementing is we're gonna base all of our application analytes off of what the PADEP calls the toxic management spreadsheet. They use this spreadsheet for all NEPDIS permits. So anytime someone's applying or reapplying for a NEPDIS permit, they have to submit analytes from this entire spreadsheet. And it's gonna cover about 50 more than we currently use. And what we currently use is based off the EPA. It's called the priority pollutant list. This spreadsheet will cover, like I mentioned, about 50 more, and it's going to cover some unregulated contaminants. It's going to cover ones that actually would be required to be monitored in NEPDIS permits. And it should give us a little bit more cushion of some of the upcoming pollutants that we may see in the future. We're also going to be requiring, let me back up. When you test for organic and semi-volatile and volatile compounds, the way that they're designed, it captures a wide array of different compounds. And if you picture sort of almost like a line chart, it's all based on the retention time in the column that it's being analyzed in. And it produces peaks, and these peaks are the intensity of the quantifiable amount that is present in that sample. Now, when we request these methods, you're only getting the results for the analytes that you actually request. And like I mentioned, that list is very, very long. So what we're going to be requiring is whichever 5 compounds have the highest intensity, the most quantifiable amount, they will have to report those results, whether or not that analyte is specifically requested in the application. So therefore, for instance, the 1,4-dioxane, in that sample from that company, it would have been one of the highest compounds that was detected. So that's something that we would have caught by using this approach. Not only that, but analytical methods, they're not soundproof. Sometimes things happen during sample collection when you're actually analyzing it, but sometimes compounds don't actually appear in your sample results. So we're also just asking these companies to report anything that they would expect to be present in that sample, but it's not present, just so that we're more aware whether or not it was a mistake or whether or not something happened analytically that we did not get results from. With all of that being said, we're also going to be having the pretreatment plant monitor these compounds on a monthly basis. Currently, they're doing the whole priority pollutant list, but this will expand it a little bit more. So even if we do miss something in the application process, we'll still have somewhat of notification from the pretreatment plant through those results and be able to work it backwards like we did in the past. Does anyone have any specific questions about that approach?
Just a quick question. So the testing of these samples are done by an independent laboratory, or they can do it themselves and report it?
They would contract an independent laboratory to get the results.
That we have certified, or they can choose any laboratory?
They can choose any laboratory. They are certified by the state. So it's not like it's.
Okay, so they're a certified state lab.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Andrew, this is Brian. Are we going to apply these requirements to contractors who have already been approved? Or is it going to be retroactive?
So yes, every year, these companies have to apply again, so it's a yearly permit. They are not required to submit these analytes every year, but this year coming up, it will be a full scan year. So we will have this type of data available for basically everyone that discharges as a pre-treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on that presentation? Andrew, I'd like to go back to the discharge of the 12,000 gallons from the waste receiving station. Can you provide us a little more details on that? Is there something we're going to do in the future to avoid such a large release during the unloading? I think it is from the unloading process, correct?
Sort of. So as it's discharged, it actually goes through a pipe into a pit, which is the waste hauler receiving station. It's not completely in sight of where the discharge is actually happening. So that was sort of the downfall of this, where the hauler was discharging but did not actually see the overflow. And like I said, that was due to a loss of power. And now there is an audible and visual alarm so that they will be full aware of if a power loss occurs and the pit is overflowing. It is worth noting that nothing actually left the stormwater outfall of the pretreatment plant. So everything was self-contained within the plant and was cleaned up within a few days afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Andrew or Jason? All right, thank you very much. We're moving on to staff comments.
I have no comments for today.
Solicitor comments.
No comments, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any comments from the public on any items at all?
No, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Jenny.
Same here.
All right, Brian, too. All right. We do not have any scheduled executive sessions, so at this point in time, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, for the meeting and the content. Stay safe and warm.
Thanks, Brian.